What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and today we are going further down the Adrian Belew branch of the Frank Zappa family tree, and we're landed at the Talking Heads. And yes, soon we will be hitting upon that bud on the branch that is, maybe you should go play with so and so. We're going to do that, but there's a lot more albums that dude has than the Talking Heads, who have 8 studio albums. So Adrian Belew is the Frank Zappa connection. Remain in Light, he was on that album, and probably other artists because like their last album, Naked, has like 47 guest artists on it. I don't think any of them played with Zappa though. Yeah, I'm not a huge Talking Heads fan. I like them. I think they're good. I think out of all the bands I have probably addressed on this channel, if I were to rank those bands, which I might do and just put that on every new thing I do, they'd probably be last so far. Like, I like them. Never saw Talking Heads live. I missed that opportunity. Seen David Byrne live a number of times and fantastic shows, like very choreographed, just amazing sort of experiences. But my main issue with the Talking Heads is David Byrne. And when he is at his most David Byrne-ish is when I least like him. And when the music sort of takes over and we go from that early sort of post-punk, quirky, eclectic, kind of like poppy, but a little too like a little too over like kinetic. When we get away from that, we go more into the dance grooves and even the world grooves, which I'm not a big fan of for most bands. I think it gets better. And then I actually like his simple sort of pop stuff. So anyways, all of that will come out over this next video. But that's it. I'm just going to talk about the Talking Heads 8 albums and what I think of them. Yeah, that's it. I don't think I have anything else to say. So let's just get right on to number 8. Oh, I don't think there's any, yeah, I think there's maybe 2 surprises. Again, I write down my list and then I kind of Google others or look at other videos just to see, want to know what I'm walking into. I think there are 2 slightly unpopular opinions on here, but I don't think they're that drastic, you know, and I think all the albums have something to offer. So that's my caveat. All of them have something to offer, so don't hate. But anyways, yeah, let's get on to number 8. Don't hate, don't wait. Yeah. Number 8 is their last album, Naked, released in 1988. Wow, they didn't make it past 1988. This one literally has 30 guest musicians on it. Apparently the band was not getting along. All 4 of them are represented in the credits. Apparently this was very much a David Byrne solo project, I guess. I don't know much about the Talking Heads, but what little I've read is that's why there's like 30 different people playing on this. And it's got its moments. It just feels a little tired, a little more like, you know, there are some, you know, there's like, I don't know. I just don't know what to think about this. It leaves me feeling really very confused. Has a couple songs that I actually think are really good. It has a number of songs that I think would be better if they weren't on this album, mainly because like the latter half of this album has sort of this just sort of very not melancholic, but very almost too low key energy. And I think if a couple of these songs had been mixed in among other more upbeat things, they might stand out a little more, you know, because of contrast. But yeah, for the most part, I just don't ever listen to this because it's got a song I really despise, and then a couple really good songs and a bunch of forgettable stuff. The CD has 11 songs. The actual LP only had 10. The bonus is Bill, a song called Bill, which is the penultimate track on the CD. The highlights, I like the opening Blind. It's kind of an upbeat, you know, just there's some really good horn parts on this album that I think work effectively because they're not just like saxophone solos sort of inserted where they don't belong, but they're actual like horn arrangements that provide some punch and some nice sort of like a little more upbeat, kind of poppy R&B type energy, but in an eclectic David Byrne way. So Blind opens up with some pretty good energy. I do not like Mr. Jones, which is the second track. I think once Dylan did a song about Mr. Jones, that the nail was in that coffin and Mr. Jones should rise no more. Though give mad props to Counting Crows for pulling it off. I still like that song. But yeah, I just Mr. Jones. I just don't like this song at all. Totally Nude and Ruby Deer, I think, are just completely forgetful sort of songs. I really like the fifth song on here, Nothing But Flowers, which closes out side A on the LP. It's sort of his kind of like chill, kind not too chill, but kind of poppy, kind of his like sort of take on like a big yellow taxi, return to nature. But I'm not really sure what he's about, because is he complaining that it's nothing but flowers? Because at one point I think he says he's going to take a lawnmower to him, but it's got this real like jaunty, almost like Rusted Root worldy vibe that I think works in this instance. And it's easily the highlight of this album for me. And I think it's a really good song. And then the rest of the album is just kind of, the opening two tracks on side B, Democratic Circus and Facts of Life, have their moments. But then the rest of it, Mommy, Daddy, You and I think is kind of forgettable. Big Daddy's forgettable. Bill and Cool Water, they just don't do anything for me. This was literally the most recent of these albums I revisited prior to this. And I can't even remember side B. Like it just like, I remember listening to it and go, oh, this isn't that bad. And now I can't even remember why it's not that bad. It's just really a forgettable final album. It just kind of goes out with a, huh. And as far as like the world beat stuff and like them trying to explore, I don't think Byrne did it all that effectively. It worked on other albums when you had more of a dance, weird vibe and you had some post-punk energy and all that kind of stuff. I don't think it works on this one, other than Nothing But Flowers, which I think is a fantastic song. But number 8, Naked. Number 7 is True Stories. This was like the soundtrack to a movie, only I think the studio wanted Byrne to sing the songs and not like the actors in the movie. So it essentially just became sort of a Talking Heads, very pop album. But I don't think the pop with what 6 extra musicians that appear on here. I don't think the pop songs on here are as tight or as interesting as on the album that preceded this, Little Creatures. And I think there's one absolutely horrible song. Both these last 2 albums have a song I despise. And then again, a bunch of forgettable songs, though it does have one of my all-time favorite songs. So it opens up for Love. It opens up with Love for Sale. Oh, this was their 7th album, and it came out in 1986. I saw the movie once, I think in the 80s, right when it came out, and then we watched it again in college because a good friend of mine was a hardcore Talking Heads fan. I don't think I liked the movie either time. It was quirky, but not that interesting. Might be better than I remember it. That was a long time ago, 30 years ago. Opens up with Love for Sale, which is a really good opening rocker. I think the energy overall on this is much better than on Naked. Puzzling Evidence, I really like Puzzling Evidence. That is one of those more extended, kind of just like riding a groove type songs. Opens up with like a good minute plus of instrumental, just groove riding before the first lyrics. And it's like, Puzzling Evidence, almost has like a gospel flavor to it. Just really good energy. Hey Now, one of the worst songs ever. I do not like this song. I think it is horrible. It makes me not want to listen to this album. If it was last, I would probably listen to this album more because I wouldn't have to skip it. I could just stop. I don't like to skip songs, but I just don't like Hey Now. I think Hey Now is just a horrible song. Papa Legba has some interesting sort of David Byrne being somewhat character driven maybe, but again, it's conceptually more interested than execution. Wild Life, the hit, which I think is a good radio friendly pop rock song. Radiohead, which doesn't do much for me as a song, but apparently it's responsible for the name of what was a pretty good band. Yeah, still is a pretty good band. Radiohead, I think is their name. Yeah, this opens up the door for that. I'm just now realizing. Yay. Dream Operator, really don't like that song. It's about as cheesy and bad as the title is. But then People Like Us, nice little Americana country rock number that I think is beautiful. Pop sweetness, works perfectly. This is David Byrne has a country, like when he taps into like the pedal steel guitar and the country vibes, works every time for me. I think this is a phenomenal song. And then City of Dreams, which is not that bad of a closer. So for the most part, I think a solid album, like some good rockers on here, couple really good energy songs, then a handful of either forgettable or just outright bad songs. But yeah, man, yeah, not bad. Number seven, True Stories. And again, I haven't seen the movie in, when did we watch that? I was living with Haber at the time, right? So that would have been 91, 92. So I haven't seen this album like 30 years, this movie in 30 years. If you've seen it more recently or know if it's out there anywhere, let me know. I may check it out again. All right, let's go on to number six. Number six is their debut album, Talking Heads 77, which came out, oh my gosh, in 77. Imagine that. Um, this is just a little too like new wave, post punk, poppy, eclectic, kind of like quirky, twerky, a little like jingly, jangly, hyperkinetic, eccentric for me. Too much David Byrne being weird, neurotic David Byrne, which I'm fine. You have your neuroses, that's okay. But yeah, it's the one album like of David Byrne-ness that it's a little too much David Byrne for me. There are good moments on here. Obviously, Psycho Killer is a classic. Kind of like I like the second half of this album better than the first half of the album. I like the opener, Love Comes to Town, but then the rest of the songs are just a little too like there's another band that this reminds me of like XTC's kind of like they were a band that kind of had this weird post-punk kind of eclectic energy for a while, and I think they just did it better because they wrote better pop hooks. I think that's what this needs. And it just I like Don't Worry About the Government, which is a song about a building and mentions food, hence the call, the shout out to the next album. More songs about buildings and food and buildings, buildings and food. But yeah, I don't know. There's not another lot of songs on here that linger with me or stick with me that are like they drop in the beginning. I'm like, oh yeah, I like this one. I'm like, oh, this one has that annoying little something. I don't know. The band sounds good. It's a great band. The rhythm section on this band is fantastic. When they would lean more into that rhythm section and really get those more like dance vibes going on pretty much the next, what, four albums, I think it's a much better band. But here, I just, yeah, man, I don't just gel well with this album. And this is one of those I've seen a lot higher on other people's lists. Um, I think it was in the book. 1001 albums you should hear before you die. I don't think that's the case. I don't think you need to hear this album. I think there are four other ones that they did, not number five, but definitely one through four that you should check out. I don't think this is one of them personally. But yeah, it's just the Talking Heads being their most weird, eclectic, kind of eccentric, kind of that post punk pop type thing that for me just doesn't work that well. And don't really have a lot to say about this album because I don't listen to it a lot because I don't enjoy it that much. So yeah, that's it. But I do recognize that it is a much better album than both True Stories and Naked. And there are no songs in here that I just despise as I despise Mr. Jones and that horrible one off True Stories. I just talked about True Stories and I can't remember that song, the Hey Now or whatever that is. I don't think any of these songs are bad. I just don't like them as much as I like everything on the next five albums. So yeah, that's all I got to say about this. My number six, their debut, Talking Heads 77. My number five is 1985's Little Creatures, another album that has the core four plus like a dozen, literally a dozen extra musicians on it. This is pretty much their straightforward pop rock album with like one song that kind of delves into a little bit of an extended type moment in it. I think there are three fantastic songs. And then the rest of them are not bad, and some of them are kind of cutesy and kind of good. Like I don't think there's a bad song on this album, and none of them bore me in any way. I don't think all of them are all that great though. I want to say "Road to Nowhere" was the lead off single, right? That was the first video that dropped in single. I wasn't a big fan of that when it first came out. Have come around to absolutely like it. It is the album closing track, and I think it is one of the best out. They do a good job of closing their albums. But when And She Was came out, I love that song. Love the just the really tight rhythm. I love the lyrics. I love the quirkiness of it. And then Stay Up Late, great rhythm. Dun dun bum bum. Just everything about it. I think my camera just moved. It's about a cute little baby. Best song about a baby. I'd rank this above XTC's Pink Thing any day of the week. Maybe not any day of the week. Maybe not on Tuesdays. But yeah, those are the highlights. The opening track, And She Was. The second side opening track, Stay Up Late. Closing track, Road to Nowhere. Everything else is pretty good. Give Me Back My Name. Okay, little pop song. Creatures of Love, I like. One of those with like a nice little country-ish pop sweet vibe. The Lady Don't Mind kind of reminds me of Give Me Back My Name. Perfect World is okay. Stay Up Late. Walk It Down, I like the energy of walk it down, talk it down. It's a really good sort of like, I don't know, strutting energy. And then Television Man is sort of the longer one. You got a little instrumental coolness towards the end, kind of neat little song. And then the fantastic Road to Nowhere to close. Maybe a low A minus tier, high B plus. Again, not the best, strongest material they have ever done, but I don't think there's a bad song. Three great songs, and I just love the production. I love the just the cleanliness of it. It's just a really tight, well produced, excellent sounding album that sounds nothing like the first five. Like this is their sixth album. They're definitely going, their sixth studio album. They're definitely going for a much cleaner, tighter sound. But the Americana vibe, the country music vibe, all that stuff thrown in, I think works really, really well. And to have an entire album devoted to that kind of vibe, I think it works. I think it's a good album. And it was the first I ever got. And again, back in the day, again, just to preach to all you young folk, if you bought an album, like you listened to that thing no matter how you felt about it at first, because you didn't have the internet. You couldn't stream a song. You had to spend your hard-earned money, and like you were going to listen to that album. And like when I was a kid, we'd ride our bikes to the record store at least once a month, save our money, our allowance money, our job money, whatever, birthday money, try to just beg money off parents, and you'd buy an album and you would listen to that thing until you could get your next one. Or until you could, borrow your stepdad's albums or borrow your friend's albums. But this is one of the ones I bought that I listen to the heck out of, and I enjoy it. But over time, I've realized it's not as strong as the next four, but I don't think it's bad, and I think it's probably better than most people give it credit for. Nice little fun pop rock album with some good country Americana in there. My number 5, Little Creatures. We are creatures of love. Number 4 is More Songs About Buildings and Food, their second album, the first of 3 that Brian Eno would produce. Came out in 78. This is a much better album than the first one to my ears. And when it doesn't work for me, and mainly like the first half and maybe one song in the second half, it's when David Byrne is being a little too David Byrne-y. But there are a lot of songs where we get maybe like sort of extended instrumental passages, or we get a little more emphasis on like the rhythm section doing really cool things rhythmically. It's got probably one of the best covers of all time in their cover of Al Green's Take Me to the River. Remember, this is 78. The internet did not exist. Radio, at least the radio in LA, was not playing Al Green. So to hear this song and be exposed to Al Green and to like have that door opened because of this was fantastic. Back when cover songs like could change like a kid's worldview. I got this album, like, I got Little Creatures, and I think I got not Stop Making Sense. The one that is from the Stop Making Sense comes from. Speaking in Tongues. When I eventually got around to this, I had heard Take Me to the River on the radio. That was a big radio song. But yeah, so I give them props for covering that. But it's got just some really fantastic songs. The opening, Thank You for Sending Me an Angel, is kind of an upbeat, really up-tempo type number. The next 2 songs I'm not big fans of, With Our Love and The Good Thing. But then Warning Sign, just a really good song. A little bit of that dance energy, a little more post-punk proggy and not as eclectically weird. And you feel the band and the music of the band is coming through a little bit more than just David Byrne's eccentricities. Local Natives, that band from like 10 years ago, covered this. That's a pretty good cover of theirs. Girls Want to Be with the Girls, not a big fan of, a little too Bernie for me. But then Found a Job is great. This opening on side 2, Artists Only, is a fantastic song. I'm Not in Love, another fantastic song that is a really nice sort of instrumental ending. Stay Hungry, okay song. But then the Take Me to the River, Big Country ending is just a 1-2 punch to end this on a really high note. So much so that sometimes I'm like, oh, let's just revisit this album again because those last 2 songs are so good. But yeah, again, it's still working out some of those post-punk poppy kinks, but for the most part, they're leaning a little more into their musical strengths, leaning a little more into the danceability of their songs, leaning a little more into just not letting it all be about David Byrne's personality, which I understand the attraction if you like it, but for me, that is sort of sometimes Byrne can be too burnish. But yeah, a really, really solid album and much more something that I think you should hear before you die than their first one. Some really good stuff on here. And again, big shout out to Take Me to the River. Absolutely phenomenal choice in cover songs. My number 4, more songs about buildings and food. Number 3 is their 4th album, Remain in Light. Yeah, I know, not number 1. I respect this album and I understand its importance in the overall discography of the Talking Heads and sort of the development and the incorporation of different styles of music and Brian Eno continuing to be Brian Eno. And there are some great songs on here. And Fish covered this for one of their Halloween shows. And then they would still play cross-eyed and playlist quite a lot in their live sets, which was the best part of that. But the end for the Overload, they brought out all these television sets and just filled the stage with it. Pretty good cover of this album. Not as good as their Velvet Underground Loaded one, to get on a tangent. But anyways, yeah, 8 songs. My problem with this is I think side 2 kind of drags a little bit. And David Byrne, like the talking that he does on one of the songs, I think Seen and Not Seen, I'm not a fan of his just sort of narration talking thing. I don't, again, my issue with the Talking Heads is David Byrne, if I have an issue with him. The first 4 songs are ridiculously fantastic. Born Under Punches, The Heat Goes On, great. That's a good incorporation. That's the closest they ever got to like Peter Gabriel levels of using sort of like world beats and different sort of like non-traditional ideas to, I think, make their songs better. Cross-Eyed and Painless, hands down, one of their greatest songs ever, one of the greatest dance songs ever. That groove is ridiculous. The Great Curve, another great song, and Once in a Lifetime, which is just sort of, one of their all-time classics, sort of Talking Head songs, maybe the Talking Head song to define all Talking Head songs. Not one of my favorite, but I understand its importance and the greatness of it. Houses in Motion I really like, but the last 3, Seen and Not Seen, Listening When, and The Overload, like when I'm listening to them, I enjoy them and I understand why people would like them as much as they do. But for me, they kind of drag. I don't think they're as, I think other bands do similar type things better, even though this might have been a trendsetter in that department. What was this? Their 4th album in 80? So yeah, they were doing things in 80 that other people were not doing yet. So they get mad props for that. And I recognize just the overall importance of this album. But as far as something I want to listen to, once Houses in Motion is over, I kind of check out. And depending on like my focusing ability, like if I'm driving and I have nothing else to pay attention to other than say the road, I enjoy this album more. But if I'm doing something else, it's not something that like compels me to listen to it. Or if I just am listening to an album, I kind of check out after Houses in Motion. I don't find the rest of it that interesting. That's just my own personal taste. I think it's just a little too, maybe the sequencing is the problem. Maybe if we had like Born Under Punches, Cross-Eyed and Painless, and then Listening Wind closed out side A, and then we had Moved the Great Curve farther back, so you had a little more contrast and like rises and dips and stuff like that. But yeah, I think the sequencing is the problem. But yeah, it's a great album. Like if you have not heard this, you need to hear it because it is an important album in the development of like pop rock music. But personally for me, it's 7 songs, 8 songs. Yeah, 8 songs, and 5 of them are fantastic and 3 of them are just sequenced poorly and just don't, don't, and one of them I kind of annoys me. David Byrne kind of annoys me. Hate to say that, but he kind of does on Seen and Not Seen. But yeah, that's all. That's all I got to say about this. Again, it's a good album. Like, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why this is one of the greatest albums ever made. I hear you. I respect your decision. I just don't like what a third of it almost. But anyways, yeah, that's all. I'm just rambling at this point. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2, Speaking in Tongues. I had a roommate slash good friend in college. We went to the flea market down in Oakland one Saturday morning, and he bought a couple cassettes, one of which was Speaking in Tongues. So whenever we were playing cards or dominoes or whatever we were doing, we listened to this album over and over and over again, and I came to absolutely love it, including the opening track, Burning Down the House, which as a teenager, I liked the song, but kind of got tired of it because it was played all the time on MTV. When did this come out? 83, right? Yeah, 83. And it came out in June. So I wonder when that video, I would spend a lot of time at my dad's in the summer, and my dad had MTV before my mom had MTV. So I probably saw it a lot that summer, which is why I didn't like it at first, but I've come around to it. This is like to predict what Fish would do. So Fish covered Remain in Light in 96. And then 97, their tour was dominated by something that they call cow funk. And cow funk, because they're from Vermont and there's cows everywhere, that's where the name came. But the cow funk was this very like kind of slow, fat bass sound and funk that just kind of like, they could like lay accents over, or Trey can drop some like wah guitar throughout, and Page could go off on. And it seems like this is where they got sort of the inspiration for the cow funk, is like things like this album, just the energy in here, the sort of slow danceability of this album, the sort of like big grooves, the dun 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 dun, dun of something like a Swamp or a Slippery People. Just, it seems like cow funk came out of this album. I'm sure that was part of the influence. But again, another one of those albums that is just, it does at times have a bad 80s sound that when I was revisiting this for the purpose of this video, I'm like, oh, this is very dated. And even though I absolutely love this song and still love it now, I recognize that if you haven't heard this and you're going to it now, that 80s drums can be a little, but yeah, I'm okay with it. Also, a lot of stuff on here reminds me of Yesayer, their Odd Blood album, and then the one they did after that, which I can never remember the name of, whatever that was. And maybe even some of their stuff, but there's a Yesayer seemed to take some of their like vibe and groove out of this. That was another 2010s-ish band. But yeah, just some great songs. And a lot of these were on Stop Making Sense, that release, the live album release, which is a pretty good live album. But Burning Down the House to opener, great song. Making Flippy Floppy, Girlfriend is Better, one of their best, just absolutely phenomenal song. Slippery People, I Get Wild Wild Gravity to close out side A. Side 2, the really funky, murky Swamp, just this great, just awesome energy in that song. David Byrne being David Byrne at his most eccentric best. Like, I think the David Byrne-isms work on this album just because the grooves are so like bigger and fatter and wilder, that his eccentricity seem to have more space in which to like operate, and yet they don't overpower or dominate the music. And so he can be weird and the music's just like funking along in this weird like mid-80s post-punk funk weirdness that this band does so well. But yeah, side B, Swamp, Moon Rocks, Pull Up the Roots, and then the almost perfect, another incredible album closer, This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody. Just this just this great little melody, some great lyrics about being home. It's where I want to be. I don't know what the lyrics are really about other than it sounds like a love song, and like, I want to be with you, I want to be home. My wife and I both love this. We put this on our wedding CD. I think it was the closing song on our wedding CD. Then we had a hidden bonus track on there. which I'll mention that if I ever get to that artist. But yeah, just a great starter with the hit "Burning Down the House," a great closer, and just some really good cow funk, slightly dance, somewhat dated 80s energy throughout that just makes for a fun, really, really neat listen. Yeah, I love this album. Absolutely love it. Yeah, my number two, Speaking in Tongues. And number one, something I've never had in my life, Fear of Music. Came out in 79. And this is really like, I think, the best sort of crossroads album. Like, you still have some of the eclectic, weird post punk new wave energy of their first two albums. You definitely are leaning more towards the world dance, like genre mixing of like the next album and the album following that. You even have a couple little pop numbers in here. You have one of the greatest songs about life during wartime called Life During Wartime, and awesome called Soul Cities, which was kind of a cow funk song that Fish would also play. You have one song which doesn't work. Like, it's a good song. It just doesn't work on this album because it really, I don't think, gels with any of the other songs, and probably would have worked much better on Remaining Light. And that is the opening I Zimbra, which has a like world beat vibe. Seems like it could have been on Peter Gabriel's Security album. Definitely feels like it would have fit more on Remaining Light. It starts off the album and almost deceptively, where you think it's going to go in a different direction, like in this direction, but then Mind, we originally go into like this, almost like the second album, like this could be a leftover from more songs about buildings, only it's a little darker and more ominous. And I think Burns' lyrics are more, there still is like, yeah, there's still Burn lyrics, but I don't know, they just work better for me. I think the songs are just better. But once you get over sort of the jarring difference of Izimbra, which is still a good song and has some really good guitar playing on there, you get Mind, Paper, the ridiculously good Cities, Life During Wartime, one of their all-time best songs. If you have not seen the Stop Making Sense version, the live performance of Life During Wartime, I know it's out there on YouTube. I think every person who reacts to videos has reacted to it. It is one of the greatest live performances of all time. Memories Can Wait. Side 2 opens up with Air, the absolutely beautiful Heaven. There is a bar, and its name is Heaven, and everybody's dying to go there. It's just a beautiful place. Nice little ballad, kind of your Americana version of the Talking Heads. Again, you're looking forward to like what Little Creatures and True Stories would be more like. You get a perfect little slice of this in Heaven. Animals, electric guitar, and the just dark drugs. Like, whatever drugs David Byrne is taking, they're not happy psychedelic drugs. They're making you like paranoid, and it feels like you're hearing noises all over the place, and it's an eerie kind of dark way to end the album. It was co-written with Eno, that song, and it feels like that could have worked on an Eno album, the drug song. But there's just a lot of really interesting riffs in here, and a lot of like not really danceable all the time, but there's some really, really neat grooves. Fripp does the guitar solo on Izimbra, so that kind of tells you that amidst all the world beat stuff, there's a really crazy guitar solo going on that sounds like Fripp channeling Baloo. Pretty much, it has a Baloo flavor more than a Fripp flavor, but good on Fripp. I mean, he came before Baloo, so give him the props. But yeah, and it's just got. There's not a bad song. This is like, they're not a bad song on this album. And again, it's pretty dense. It's pretty got, it's got some hummable stuff, some simple stuff, but it's got some really intricate parts and a lot of different ideas. And yeah, man, it's their perfect album. It is the one album that, like, if I had to make every other album sound more like another album, this is the album I would want all their other albums to sound like. I think this is perfect, and it's got so many of their best songs. But that is my number one, something I've never had my entire life, Fear of Music. And that's it, people. That's all I got to say about the Talking Heads for today. Let me know what you think, what your favorite album is, why I'm wrong about my rankings, why I'm right about my rankings, why I should reconsider them. You know how comments work? We all know how comments work. We're adults. Some of you might be kids. You could probably figure it out. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, listen, share, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, stay warm, people. Peace be with you. And have a happy holidays, because I'm filming this right before there are holidays. So whenever you're watching this, have the happiest next holiday that occurs to you. And talk to you later, y'all. Peace.